Open loops. Do, do. Open loops. Open loops. Open loops. Open loops. You must listen to the open loops, a theme park for absurd beliefs and systems of integration between the mind and the creative spirit. Open loops.
Today on Open Loops. Now look, this is a very interesting episode. This episode is kind of like I'm stepping into a parallel dimension. Because yes, we are talking to somebody else who has a community of people that he also calls loopers. Yes. Who could it be? Who is a fellow looper? Why, it's none other than a renowned hypnotherapist, trainer, coach who specializes in conversational hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, the creator of the Enter the Loop conversational hypnosis framework. We have Timothy September on the show today. This is going to be a very interesting interview, and specifically, I'm excited. I'm excited to talk to somebody that is a looper, as well as someone that, how should I put this? I think it is very good to get into the philosophy of what is loops as it relates to hypnosis and as it relates to thinking in general, which is always what we're trying to do in this show. We're trying to expand consciousness and help us understand ourselves and each other more. And, someone's teaching this to hundreds and hundreds of people. He has a course. He has a cohort, live cohort coming up November 17th. I mean, we're going to get into all of it. I want to understand. I want to enter the loop. Timothy, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Oh, Greg, thank you so much for having me, man. I got to tell you, I've actually been looking forward to this for a while. I know we've had to reschedule a couple times because I got sick as all get out the last time that we had this scheduled, man. I thank you from the bottom of my heart, by the way, for being so willing to push this back and postpone it. Means the world to me. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, look, I'm always curious about this because I know, and we've spoken before, that you've originally, you weren't in the world of hypnosis originally, right? How'd you even get pulled into this?
Oh, man. So I'll take you all the way back, 2014, right? I used to be a mobile glass blower, meaning I would literally travel all around the United States and I would blow glass. I had a mobile shop and I had that, one of those big tents that you would set up, and then right there in front of everybody, I had microphone, and I would tell people what I'm doing, all this stuff like that. And while I was doing that, I was having the worst time of my life. That was while I felt like I was doing extraordinary things, like traveling the United States, blowing glass everywhere. I also was going through some mental and emotional anguish. And at the time, I started doing more self-development work. So I started looking into yoga, meditation, the usual routes people go. And then I started picking up books like Tony Robbins, Unlimited Power, right? And I started looking at other books like Jen Sincero. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but it's You Are a Badass. It's such a great, oh my gosh, such a great book, right? And so I started reading all of this material, and started to apply it, not just to myself, but I had hours to kill when I wasn't blowing glass being a vendor. So people would just come up and talk to me. Oh, well, how'd you get started blowing glass? And like, what are you doing? Blah, blah. And sometimes though, people would start diving into like deep conversation. And I don't know. That's kind of been the thing that happens to me is people just dump their life story on me. Right. And before this, I was kind of shy. I didn't really know what to say. I've never had to, deal with anybody's problem before on a professional level. But what was interesting is that reading these books, it seemed like the foundation for not just helping myself, but also the foundation of everything that I was learning could be used to help other people. And so instead of me shying away from listening and just sitting there and being present with other people, I started asking questions and being curious and using the skills that I had learned from these people, right? And so I remember one time, and it's something that I talk about often, I used to make these little glass jellyfish. And if you go on my website or like my old Instagram account or anything like that, you can find my stuff, right? And I even show like pictures inside of the Enter the Loop course. And these little glass jellyfish, I used to have just a table full of them. And this one woman came up and she picked up one of these jellyfish and started talking about how her mom would absolutely love it. But her mom had just passed away. And so she's like, this woman's here just like crying and in grief, talking about her mom. And most other vendors would be like, hey, that's great. Are you going to buy something? Like, I don't know what to tell you. Are you going to buy something, right? But instead I ended up talking to this person for forever. At least it seemed like forever, right? She didn't buy anything. However, I ended up walking away from that conversation feeling like I was the richest person ever, because while I was going through absolute anguish myself, mental turmoil, emotional turmoil from stuff I'm not going to get into, but it was pretty heavy stuff myself. While that was going on, it was one of the first times in my life I actually felt fulfilled. Like blowing glass was great. Like it was, but to actually feel like I'm making a contribution to something that's greater than myself. Like I didn't know this person, but they walked away smiling and feeling better. And it was one of the first times in my life I felt amazing. I felt incredible. And I was like, I want more of that. Because I think that's like, as people say, like they chase the golden dragon, right? And some people, they spend their whole life trying to pursue this elusive like thing that we call passion, purpose, right? And in that moment, I was like, I think this is it. And so I ended up diving even deeper into everything from NLP, like, learning Terry Steele, Monsters and Magical Sticks, NLP stuff from like Bandler and Grinder, and I was so fascinated by everything that I discovered. And then I started diving into things like, Mike Mindell Hypnosis Academy. Got an account there to start learning hypnosis. And I decided I was going to walk away from glassblowing entirely. And part of the anguish I was going through actually happened to be what I was going through in the business with people that I was in business with. And so one day I told them, I'm like, I'm done. I was like, this is not serving me anymore. It's been a great run, but I just can't do it. And I got verbally obliterated. I mean, they said some of the worst stuff that you could say to a person. And I was just like, you know what? I'm done. And that was also one of the first times I actually like stood up for myself, because I used to be one of those people that ran from conflict and I didn't know how to talk myself out of, a wet paper bag, so to speak. Right. But instead, with this new, I don't know, it was like this newfound like energy that I had for this thing that I wanted to do. I ended up getting my life coach certification, got NLP certified, got my board certification, be a board certified hypnotherapist. Like I started going down this track, and man, it's been an absolute blast ever since. And I guess, so to directly answer your question about like the whole Enter the Loop and like how I got started, most people think hypnosis is about, well, I'm going to hire a hypnotist and then they're going to ask me some things about my problem. Then I'm going to get hypnosis done. Right. And then it's like, okay, then we finish up the session. Right. And I actually found that was detrimental to what I really wanted to do, because imagine if the person that was on the other end of my table way back in 2014, if they had approached me and then I said, oh, well, I would love to help you with this, but you're going to have to come into my office and we're going to have to schedule some time. I have to do a discovery call. And how disingenuous is that? That sucks. Like no one wants to go through that, right? So I found that the traditional way that we typically do our hypnosis sessions, same thing applied to NLP, life coaching. It kind of the same framework is you do some type of discovery or strategy call or whatever. They show up, you do the work, and then you send them out, dust them off, send them away, right? Well, how am I supposed to be the one to help change the world or be the catalyst to helping change the world, which is one of the Loop's motto is like, I want to give 1 million people a breakthrough. Imagine the lives we could change if 1 million people had this like deep experiential, I'm not going to say spiritual. For some people it is, but for other people, it's like just this experiential, my life suddenly seemed better. And I don't know why, but I feel peace. I feel at ease. I feel like I can do more than I could all through conversation.
Yeah.
And if I stuck to the traditional hypnosis route, I would have never learned that you could do all of that stuff, all the NLP, all that through everyday conversation. And by doing that, we can help a lot more people.
That's super. I mean, definitely a super interesting story. And I kind of love that it wasn't just your typical, I mean, you do hear a lot of, I was smoking and then it was the one thing that worked. I saw a hypnotherapist and, he cured me and I was like, I need more of this. Also, you're not supposed to say cure, I guess, but yeah, some people might say that cure, but it made me a non-smoker. But that is to have the intellectual curiosity. Let me ask you something about that.
Yeah.
In terms of who you are and the background that you had crafting and blowing this glass, what do you think? Because you've been a trainer too, and you've seen a lot of people go through Mike Mandel's hypnosis school. That I'm sure have also, they picked up the Tony Robbins book. They're into the self-help, self-development. What do you think is the difference between someone that starts becoming very interested in this and doesn't actually do anything except keep studying it versus you? What is the Timothy September difference that made the difference? Because what I would say is, at some level, and we'll get into this, there were loops you needed to be closing actively if you were going to get to the place of eventually having a methodology that you were training others. So what do you think it was for you? What moved you there?
That's actually a great question. There were definitely loops that needed closed. And that's, the whole premise of Enter the Loop is about identifying not just open loops that need closed, but also identifying the loops that we ourselves go through every day. And so to simply, I guess to answer your question as simple as I can think of, the loops that I needed to close were ones that were very traumatic to my past, but they were the ones I think that ultimately were the catalyst to me teaching other people how to do this thing. Because at first, like almost every other person that I've talked with that's been like, oh, I'm going down the hypnosis route, it started with me. Like I realized I had a bunch of stuff that I needed to work on, and that if I stayed where I was stuck in the next year, I wouldn't be able to look back at myself and be okay with that. I would have regretted doing nothing more than I would have regretted the pain and hardship that I had to go through to be who I am, right? To, be the trainer, to, get the clients, to build the business. Like that was hard. All of it's been hard. It's been difficult. It really has. Now to be where I am now and to look back, it's also bittersweet. Like I know how difficult it was. And also at the same time, man, it was really fulfilling to know that I'm also helping people who are probably in the same situation. So for me, I had to close my own loops. And the only way that I could do that is by learning about the unconscious mind, or some people use subconscious. So I use unconscious mind. It's how I was learned. It's, it's what Milton Erickson used. And so I like using that verbiage, right? So the difference, I think, is that some people just want to only learn it to work on themselves, and that's completely fine. And I would say that if that is anybody's goal, that is more gold than anything, because we can only love other people and care for other people in the same capacity that we can ourselves. And so one of the most difficult loops that I had to close personally was looking myself in the mirror, eye to eye, and saying, I love you, Timothy. That was, of all of the techniques, all of the everything, that was the hardest one for me to do. And I'm not the only person. I've taken other people through that same exercise, and it's hard because you have to learn to love all aspects of you, even with the loops open. And what was interesting is that when I finally was able to get those words out and really look at myself sobbing and say it, I felt whole. I felt great. It was the same connection, that same fulfillment that I had talking to the girl on the other side. But for the first time, it was like, oh my gosh, I've got this for me. Like, if I feel this way, imagine other people. Like, how many other people need this? And so that is like one of the just things that really sparked this interest in the unconscious mind, closing these loops, the proverbial and, the sometimes figurative and literal loops, because some people in their body, they'll hold their loops, like people with chronic arthritis. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of Stephen Blake, and he teaches something called Old Pain to Go. He talks about, and so he's a specialist in Scotland. This guy is incredible. I mean, his training, if anyone ever has an opportunity, it's Old Pain, the number 2 Go. This guy is all about helping people get rid of chronic pain, arthritis, like fibromyalgia, you name it. He's worked on it, right? And one of the things that he talks about is this idea of people have loops that are like the second story, is what he calls it. So our traditional conscious loop would be, oh, well, yeah, I had this arthritis pain because I used my hands too much, right? But then the unconscious loop is typically the metaphorical story that is directly attached to the ailment. So in this case, somebody, for example, that they can't use their hands, right? Like I'll go back to that example. He might start to ask them questions about what exactly this has to do with maybe an emotional thing that they bring up. So he connects the physical loop to the emotional loop. And what ends up happening is the second story starts to arrive where they'll say something like, oh, I don't know. I mean, I guess what comes up, it reminds me of I just feel like I just can't get a grip on my life. And it's like, oh, so he'll dive into that. He'll dive into the emotional side. Because once you can close that loop, the psychosomatic responses begin to change. And I think all of us have experienced that in one way, shape, or form. Like maybe people have, headaches that they can't really explain. And then suddenly the ex that they've been trying to get rid of, moves to another town or something like that, and the headache's gone, right?
Yeah.
Or there's all these psychosomatic symptoms of everyday problems that most people are completely unaware of. But that's because they're mostly unaware of the loops or the behaviors, the habits, the trains of thought that happen, the metaphors that they say out loud or the metaphors they say to themselves that intentionally and unintentionally cause the energetic response of the loop to happen. So you could think of the person who used to do a thing way back in the day because it got them attention. Like, oh, well, I'm going to act up because I know if I act up, my parents will give me attention and that makes me feel good. And then that worked when they were 4 or 5. And now suddenly they're an adult and they're in a serious relationship trying to do the same behaviors. That loop of, oh, if I do X, I'll get Y is running in their life like a little program and they have no idea why it's happening. So you break that loop and then help them realize that it was a great behavior. It had some type of intention that was positive. How can we now create a new loop, a futuristic loop? One that I've got from Al Krasner, and he wrote the book The Wizard Within. Ryan Montes, he's one of my mentors. He taught about it, and it's the idea of VERI, vivid end result imagery. It's where you have the person imagine all the things they're doing, not the emotions they'll feel, but all of the things that they're doing in the future. Now the problem's gone. And that opens up a future loop because in order for us to close a loop, one has to open. And the Zeigarnik loop is once a loop is open, it'll persist until it's closed. So if we can close one loop, as Carl Smith says, we have to backfill. David Snyder also says we have to put something in its place, right? So we have to do that. If we close a loop, there's going to be space. And instead of that space just being empty, if we open up this vivid end result imagery, this future loop for them, that void now starts to have energy, because we just closed a loop that was holding on to the energy, but now it has this energy to help them flow and move forward. So instead of people waiting for motivation, it's suddenly there. And people will often say after we've helped close the loops, like, I feel like I have more energy. I feel at peace. I feel like I'm on, cloud nine. I feel light. I feel elated. And these are all of the psychosomatic symptoms of the loop closing. And so, yeah, I don't know how we got on that, but
I mean, you would think we wouldn't know how. I mean, isn't that the point?
That is the point. That's right.
Exactly. But what I was going to say to this, I think, is very interesting. And I want you, I mean, look, if people listen back to the really early episode, maybe about the first 150 episodes of this show, I used to tease the audience. I used to say, now, what is an open loop? Well, we'll get back to that later.
We'll get back to that.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of the idea. And then I might explain it a little bit to people. But my question for you is this, from your perspective, because there are, and I think one of the things that really still continues to draw me in about hypnosis is we don't really, I even know Mike Mandel plays with this a lot. We don't really have a definitive definition. We don't really, it's a verb. It's not a verb. It's a metaphor, but sometimes it's not. And I think that is kind of the hypnotic part of the very idea of hypnosis in the first place. But for someone like me, that is very much a researcher of this. I love when people bring in new models of hypnosis, and I love when people bring in new models of the mind. And there are a lot of hypnotists out there that don't use loop talk. They don't call it a loop. There's not lots of, I mean, maybe it's because they're more direct or I do hear it more and more, the vernacular now. I mean, I know certainly one of the first people that brought it in a modern way, a contemporary way that I could understand, was James Tripp, when he started talking about his loop and the idiodynamics and all that, and bringing it to phenomena. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's not just deeper. He put a loop-like structure to it. What is it about the loop that drew you in? Like, you heard different models of hypnosis. You're reading Tony Robbins. I'm sure you came across more, I suppose, arguably more linear ideas of what hypnosis is. What is it about the loop that resonated with you and really formed the basis of everything you now understand and work with the mind?
Oh man, that's a great question. I think first off, I absolutely love James Tripp stuff. His Hypnosis Without Trance model is one of the models that I introduce in Enter the Loop. I come at it from a different angle though. The way that I tell people is that it's less about looking at this as like hypnosis, right? His model. And it's more so how everyday problems kind of appear. Like most people who have a problem, let's say it's, I ruminate and I have social anxiety, right? And then you ask the person, okay, well, like, tell me more about what the social anxiety is. And they go, oh, well, I don't know. I just ruminate about this conversation that I had 15 years ago with this person. And it's like, okay, so that is really them having their own hypnosis without trance. Their own trance is happening. So the way that I teach is like, that's not a trance loop. It's more like the problem loop. It's trance, it's hypnosis, absolutely. But if we can look at it as the problem, like they believe it's still happening, because all belief in reality is just truth without evidence. Like, when I'm a kid, I used to believe Santa Claus existed. Never saw him. All I knew is people talked about him. And so I believed he existed. And so as James Tripp puts it, you go belief, imagination, physiology, experience. So as a kid, I'm believing Santa's real. Now I start to imagine him flying over my house and dropping presents and going down the chimney, right? And the physiological response is, oh, I get all excited because it might be happening, right? And then the experience is I wake up that next morning, trees under presents under the tree, and I go, oh, he's real. And that reinforces my belief. Now, that's Santa Claus, right? But this could be, like I said, the rumination about the problem that happened way back in the day. It could be, people that feel like they have anxiety but don't know why. People that struggle sleeping. People that procrastinate. Lack of motivation. Like there's all of these, what we would call an everyday problem. And I got that from Mike Mandel. And it's this idea of people's problems are really just their lack of understanding of what's going on, like unconsciously, but also it's their inability to describe why they do the things they do. And so for me, the whole idea of loops really started with conversation. Like as a life coach, we kind of have our own frames of, it's not therapy, obviously, but, we learn about the self and how to self-actualize is to become the greatest version of you that's possible. So it has to be some greater mission, right? But in order to achieve that, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to do this. There's kind of these things you have to do. Like you have to imagine what that's like. Like most people think of the idea of manifestation, right? And we imagine it happening in the future. We hold the emotion for 17 seconds. And then what we do is we now imagine ourselves doing all the things. And then we let our unconscious mind kind of take over. All right. That's the general idea of manifestation. And what I learned is that that's actually the reticular activating system, the RAS, right?
Yes.
That was one of my first introductions to this whole idea of loops, because the RAS is really good at helping you get what you want. And it allows the unconscious mind to operate, because the RAS is what they would call the gateway between reality and what's happening in your brain. It's the only direct connection from your brain to your body and all the things happening outside externally, right? All the stimulus that you take in, all the sensory, everything, right? So learning about the RAS, because I mentioned the book, Jensen's Heroes, You Are a Badass, talks about it in detail, but she talks about it from the level of spiritual manifestation. What I gleaned from that book was more so the psychological, how do I get my brain, my unconscious mind, to just do the things for me? Because it's been happening all the time. So I started diving in through journaling to my own processes. And I used a book from Jeanette Connor, and it's called Writing Down Your Soul. Amazing book. I mean, incredible book. She's one of the first people that actually taught me about the unconscious mind in a different way besides it's this thing in your brain. And she actually she teaches you how to do what she calls stream of consciousness writing. And then at some point you see like these other parts of you kick in. The handwriting's different. The phrases that it uses are different. It's like, it's like, so you just go. And then suddenly like you're 3 pages deep. And then she says, okay, pause. Now go back and start underlining all of the areas that while you were writing suddenly look different. And I was like, that's interesting. So what happened was I started finding myself becoming super curious about why this was happening in real life. I was writing, boom. What is that? Like that's interesting. And I found that the more times that I saw something that I didn't understand, it sparked almost that same feeling in me as like working with the person on the other end of the table or figuring out my own problems, looking myself in the mirror. All of these are loops because it all comes back to either the loop closes and we have, I have energy again, or the loop is still persisting and I still feel like garbage. And I think a lot of people do that. So when I start reading my own handwriting and I'm looking at it and I'm going, but that's not me. Like, I wouldn't say that about myself. I wouldn't say that about other people. I wouldn't think this thing. I wouldn't speak this way. And then I start asking myself, because she gives you a whole bunch of prompts. Like, when you find that, ask yourself X, right? So I started doing that. And every time I did that, this part of my writing that I'm like, oh, this isn't me, starts showing up more and more. So I'm like, my unconscious mind must be kicking in or something. I don't know what's going on, but it's incredible. So I've got like, I had, anyways, I don't have them anymore, but I had just like notebook after notebook. I would go down to the dollar store and buy like an 80 page, spiral bound notebook. And I would fill the whole thing up in a day because I was just like journal. I was learning so much about myself. I had time. Yeah. And the more that I unlocked these loops of who I was, my personality, like why I said, why I did, all this other stuff, I started becoming more interested in, well, if this worked for me, how can I help other people with this? So I introduced it into my life coaching, and I started introducing not just the journaling itself, but the prompts that she gave were really interesting because they're very clean languagey. They're like the prompts are they're like short enough that you could fit it on like a single line, right? It's typically never like 2 or 3 lines deep. It's like one sentence, like 15 words or less. And it's like there's no adverbs, there's no adjectives. It's just very simple, like clean language. And if anyone's curious about clean language, check out Dr. David Grove. Judy Reese and Wendy Sullivan wrote a book called Clean Language, an amazing book. It's about understanding how people talk in metaphor and how to actually ask questions to dig into their metaphor. I introduced that and Enter the Loop as a way to help people unlock what their loops are. But it's more than just metaphor. We go into like nominalizations, unspecified verbs, resources, parts, ego states, that kind of stuff. So that's more advanced level, expert level stuff. I don't want to bore your people with all that. But my own loops ended up becoming this thing that I wanted to share with other people through the work that I was doing. And by working with other clients, I helped them, like Tom, for example. He was this guy, he was late 50s, early 60s, worked a corporate job, like 30 years in the same place his whole life, right? Comes to me as a life coach. And during the intake part of it, I come to find out he just got laid off from his job, like, and now, mind you, I was like, I don't know, like 28, 29, 30. I can't remember, but I was still young, right? I'll be 40 next year. So I was still young. And I, ended up talking with this guy, and he got laid off from his job, lost, relationship that he had with his spouse, long-term relationship, had to move back home with his parents, was living in the basement. And now he's coming to me for help. Like, I was lost, dude. What am I supposed to do as this young guy helping this guy that's been, corporate world, like all of that, right?
Wow.
So I help him start diving into his own loops, and come to find out that I didn't have to solve his problem of like, oh, I need to get back out into the workforce. He repaired his relationship with his dad. By doing that, it allowed him to start building a better relationship with himself, which in turn closed loops that he was unaware of. He ended up finding a new job, new spouse, and a year later is now living with this person, about to get married. His life transformed. And I think I worked with him for about a year straight. But when I first started, man, I was lost because I didn't know what to do. So that's when I realized that I don't have all the answers. And I think that's what makes Enter the Loop. And there's so many other modalities, like Mike Mandel teaches something called mindscaping, where it's a client-centered approach. And I really didn't know what that was back then. But something deep down inside of me told me I don't have all the answers. And if people come to me expecting them, I'm going to fail them. So instead, what if I leaned on the wisdom of people like Milton Erickson, who said, you're not going to have the answers. Your client does. The person in front of you that has the breadth of existence that they've experienced in this human condition of, all the great emotions and the terrible, all their life experience, all of that stuff. You've got an hour with them. Do you really think that you know more about their life and what's best for them in that hour? No, obviously not. So they have all the answers. So in order to help them find the answers, I had to get better at asking questions and helping them dive in, not just to, well, what are these loops that are playing in your head or that you feel in your body or whatever? More so, what are the loops that are happening that if we weren't together, you could ask yourself these questions and you'd be able to start to figure your own stuff out. So I started introducing things like empowering questions. And I got that from Mike Mandel and Chris Thompson, which is all about asking yourself better questions. And once you do that, your brain, your unconscious mind starts to generate really good answers. And so that's really what took me on this trajectory of traditional hypnosis, where I'm the one saying everything, to, well, now I'm going to ask really good questions and the other person is going to be the one to give the answer. So it's not on me. The onus of change is now on them. And what ended up happening is people started to come back because most of us ask really stupid questions of ourselves. Like, so, take example, somebody saying something like, well, I just feel really dumb. And okay, well, typically the question they would ask themselves, and this was how I was way back in the day, so like no judgment to anybody, right? How I was back in the day was I would ask myself, well, why am I so stupid? Well, your unconscious mind, your brain is really good at going and searching for answers and finding them and producing the result to you. So if anybody is listening to this, just ask yourself really quick, like, well, why am I so X? And you'll find your brain will go, oh, well, it's because of this and this. And so I discovered, and this is through Mike and Chris talking about empowering questions, that if you flip the why and turn it into a what or a how, suddenly your brain starts looking less for the evidence of this is why you do things, but you take the what and the how questions and you now point them into the future, and you put it in the positive. And so I started doing this on myself. That was part of my self-work. And I started bringing that into my sessions too. So I would have, like Tom, I basically told him, here's a bunch of Post-it notes. During our session, you're going to write down the questions that you think are important to you. I'll review them. I'll help you, make them better. And then you take them at home, put them right up on your mirror when you're brushing your teeth. And every day, look at these questions and ask yourself. Just let your unconscious mind generate the answers. So he would come and see me 2 weeks later. And he would have this, like, just a plethora of just genius level thought about his life, about his relationships, like how he's now seeing the patterns that are playing out with him and his parents play out with him and his ex. And like, he's now starting to understand the why that so many people look for. Because Stephen Blake even said, he goes, your client will come in not wanting you to actually help them, but they're wanting answers for why they're doing the things they're doing. They want meaning behind it. So it's the metaphor he uses is like, for his pain patients, is like, they'll come in with this like hot iron poker, right? Like just this, it's a piece of metal and it's just absolutely red hot and they're holding onto it. It's burning the heck out of their hand. And they'll go, I don't know why I'm holding this. And he'll say something like, well, I can help you get rid of it. I can help you drop it. And they'll go, no. I want to know why I'm holding it. And Melissa Tiers, Ernest Rossi, like all these really smart people, much smarter than me, have all said the same thing. The reason why in hypnosis, or if we're watching a really good movie, or, we're reading a really good book, and if someone tells us a story, right? And it impacts us and causes like an ab reaction where we cry, or maybe we have that emotional like sensation of like, oh, I don't know what that was, but something just hit me. It feels great. That is because your unconscious mind has just applied learning or meaning to what the thing was. And that's what I think a lot of people are searching for, is the meaning, the reasons why. So to Tom, for me to have him ask himself questions, he's now starting to watch these patterns play out in his life. And he is the one discovering the why, not me being like pointing it out, saying, oh, this is why X and that's why Y, right? No, he's figuring it out. And that is the secret, I think, to all change work. If anyone listening to this is like, what is like one golden nugget? It's that anybody can change their life once they have the meaning behind why the things happened. And sometimes it's just helping them connect two dots by asking a great question. Sometimes it's letting them explore how the pattern used to play out and how it's playing out now. And then they have that realization of, oh, that's why I do X. And once they have that, they now have the epiphany, the aha moment. That's the spark of genius that makes them go, oh, well, I'll just stop doing this now, or I'll stop feeling this way. And suddenly their life starts to change because it takes time. But all of that to say, just asking better questions, not just of clients, but also myself, is really what took everything off.
That is so okay. Well, I have a lot of thoughts on what has just transpired between us. Most of I mean, one of the things that's coming to mind right now is I'm going, why is Timothy, who is has an entire modality. I mean, we did this, and when I met you this summer at Hypnothoughts Live at Las Vegas, you took me briefly through an exercise, a session, a kind of a light version of what you might do in one of these sessions,
Yeah.
and I was talking the whole time, which to me, I'm like, okay, well, of course I'm interested in that because you would, it's me talking. And also you guided there were certain little nuances and things I noticed there. I was like, okay, I could see how this would work. I could see how this would, um, uh, leave the openness of the question you're asking. Like you would start to ask a question and then I would jump in because the few words you spoke did actually prompt another response for me that just kind of like came out unconsciously. But then the flip side of it is that you just told me a ton of stories and use metaphors and drop lessons in here that were also very interesting, but I was just pulled into you. So let me ask you something here. From a conversational hypnosis perspective, you have Richard Bandler, you have hypnotists, Mike Mandel. I mean, people that are just so good at weaving tales and stories and actually open loops, dovetails with nested loops, which is starting to suggest something and then, then going off on a different tangent and bringing it back. How does the methodology of coaching, is there like, how does this help with presenting in general, or is it connected to bringing a point? Because clearly unless truly I'm just interested in everything you're saying, which I actually do think I am, I imagine there is some unconscious weaving of languaging that allows me to pleasantly go along with it as well.
Yeah. So the exercise you and I did is like a very, very simple one, right? So Clark Hall, he was a Harvard psychologist. He wrote a book called Hypnosis and Suggestibility, or Hypnosis and Suggest, something like that. And the book was, really, really good. And he's actually one of the people that Milton Erickson trained under. And one of the phrases that everybody uses from him is anything that assumes trance causes trance. Now, in our traditional hypnosis sense, what that means is that, let's say, one of the trance phenomena that can happen spontaneously is like a cataleptic hand. And so, like, let's say your person's hand becomes cataleptic, meaning that it's the waxy, the antagonist and agonist muscles end up becoming very balanced. And so it's almost like this very waxy immobility, right? What ends up happening is that Clark Hall said that if I do hypnosis on somebody and that occurs spontaneously, well, what if I cause that first? And then that gives me the entry wedge into what we would call somnambulistic trance, a deeper level of just our conscious awareness of right now, right? So I started thinking to myself, well, what exactly is that with conversation? Like,
right?
We have everyday conversation. Like, we're talking to people, right? But sometimes the conversation's different, where it's so interesting that an hour passes by, 2 hours, right? Like, we're all on the dance floor, we're having a good time, and then somebody goes, "Oh my gosh, it's like 1:00 in the morning," and we all, "Oh, what do you mean? It's only been like 15 minutes. We're having fun," right?
Yeah.
So I had to start analyzing what made those instances of hypnosis different than like I'm doing a session on somebody, right? So conversation is interesting because we typically think of conversation as a back and forth, right? Like I say something and then I wait for you to respond, and then you say something and then wait for me to respond, right? Well, that's okay. But for change work, it's, that's now going down the route of like traditional talk therapy. And I don't, anybody listening here, I have my own therapist. I 100% think that everyone should have a therapist. I really do.
Yes.
You should have at least somebody to be able to talk to about what's going on in your own head. That's why journaling works so well, because at least you can like self-prompt and write and get the stuff out. Sometimes though, prompting, like journal, it can be a little uncomfortable. So always having somebody to talk with is great. When I started thinking, though, about those deeper level conversations that you might have with a therapist, I realized that only one person's talking, usually. And what's the therapist doing? asking questions, right? So that's super interesting. What about that? Well, I start looking at Milton's old stuff, and most people have no idea that Milton actually used to ask questions to help people get into trance. He would ask something that's called an implied directive. Rossi talks about this a lot, and Richard Hellivan talks about it in Mirroring Hands. What an implied directive is that if I give you a suggestion, I can tack on something that implies that you'll do the thing without ever having to say it. So how Erickson would do this is, for example, if I just wanted someone to like fall into a deeper trance, right? Instead of me saying, and I wonder how fast you can fall into a deeper trance, Erickson would actually compound it with a question, which is where we got tag questions, right? Because he would say, couldn't you, right? And suddenly it's a question. But he would compound it with two questions. Here's how he would do it. Genius level stuff. He would say something like, and I wonder at what level of comfort you're noticing now as you continue to go into a deeper level of trance. So now you're not thinking about going into trance. The implied directive is that I'm now going to ask myself what level of comfort I'm at, with the directive being because I'm already in trance, therefore I feel the comfort. So you see, that's Clark Hall's loop. That's the one of the other loops that we talk about, right?
Yes.
Anything that assumes trance causes trance. So in your direct question of like, how does this work in like presentation or whatnot, think of like some of the best presenters that you've ever seen on stage, right? Like Mike Mandel is an amazing presenter, right? At HypnoThoughts, you can actually find his 2018 HypnoThoughts keynote that he gave. It's a 30-minute keynote, and I think he did like 8 to 12 nested loops, all built into just his keynote. If you watch it though, he'll open a loop on one part of the stage, and then he'll go to the other side of the stage and start beginning to tell another story. So what he's doing is he's spatially anchoring where the loops are.
Yes.
And what's interesting is that all of us do this too with our hands. Everybody talks with their hands. If you start to watch though, and it's in hypnosis, we call this calibration. And all calibration is you look at the person when you first see them and you get a baseline for what they look like. How are their eyes, aligned in terms of, are they frowning? What are their eyebrows doing? How's their face looking? Is it more like a hypnotic mask? Like it's, nice. Is it flaccid, or is it, rosy, or is it not, right? There's all these things that we would call external trance indicators. So one thing that we can do when it comes to like, using our hands, specifically Enter the Loop and what I teach, is that people unconsciously will use their hands to pantomime metaphor. They'll show you like how emotions feel. They will spatially anchor things either far away from them or up close. They'll use their hands to show you where their timeline is. So they'll say stuff like, oh yeah, over there, I don't want to deal with that stuff in the past. And they're like, I only want to move forward. So now you're getting this, also this, what we would call this bi-hemispheric interaction where one half of the body is doing one thing and the other half of the body is doing something else. And that alone is us spatially anchoring things. It's us letting our unconscious mind use our body to be the thing that's showing the active loops happening, right? Now, in everyday conversation, most people are unaware of it. Like that's obvious. Like we're just there to have a conversation, shoot the crap, as they say. I don't know if you allow cussing. So I'm being very smooth with my words here, to make it family friendly, right? In everyday conversation, that's fine. What I found that was change work is that you have to get the other person to participate more than you. And so by asking questions, what ends up happening is the unconscious mind, Milton Erickson said this, and Ernest Rossi talked even more about it. In the book Hypnotic Realities, on page 191, they introduce this idea of questions. And in there, Rossi specifically asked Milton, what is it about questions? And Milton said, the unconscious mind will always go for the search. It will always go looking for an answer. Some people get the answer immediately. Some people might not get the answer for years down the road, right? But what happens is if you can imagine your brain is like a search engine like Google, right? If I wanted to find what the best chocolate chip cookie recipe in the world was, I wouldn't say, why is the best chocolate chip cookie recipe in the world? ? It doesn't make sense. But people will ask themselves these questions, not realizing that that's what they're doing. So a why question is like, why are chocolate chip cookies the best cookie in the world? And then Google will go out and say, oh, well, based on this poll that we received with, blah, 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 it'll give you evidence, right?
Yeah.
If I say, what is the best chocolate chip cookie recipe in the world, Google will very specifically say, it is this one here because of why, right? Usually like with what questions, there's like a because at the end of it, right? How, though, is the step-by-step process. So how questions will produce the end result, the do X, Y, Z, and you'll get this, right? So when it comes to people asking better questions, not just of their client, but also of themselves, that's why I don't ask why questions. I only stick with what and how. What gives me evidence, specific evidence? It was talked about very specifically in Monsters and Magical Sticks. And that's, I think it was, no, not Monsters and Magical Sticks. Sorry. No, it is. No, Transformations, book 1. That book is the one that Bandler and Grinder introduced the meta model, which is using language to clarify language. So if somebody said, oh, I just feel sad, you go, okay, tell me more. What kind of sad? And they'll start talking, go, okay, well, specifically what kind of sad? Because it could be, oh, I'm sad because the weather, I'm sad because I had a bad day, like a whole bunch of things, right? So in our usual back and forth conversational sense, it's less about, in a therapeutic sense, it's less about this back and forth and more if I give you a prompt, if I ask you a really good question, and then I give you space and presence to sit with it and to really, really sink your teeth into it metaphorically, your brain will start to generate answers. And as long as I have good rapport with you and you're willing to be vulnerable and to talk about things, like very similar to what happened at HypnoThoughts, sparks of genius come up. It's the things that I call like, epiphanies. It's those moments of like, aha, like, oh, like where did that come from? I never would have put that together, right? And you had a couple of those at HypnoThoughts.
Yes, definitely.
And all I'm doing is to bring this now back full circle, right? All I'm doing is, just like Clark Hall said, in our conversations, people will tell their story. They will tell their metaphor about why they do the things they do, or what prompted them to do the things they do, or behave, or how they feel, etc. The same way Clark Hall said, well, anything that assumes trance causes trance. So if I have a cataleptic limb, well, in everyday conversation, our metaphors are just like that. They're hypnotic because they're abstract. Most people's problems are abstract. Unless I'm like, oh, I just like lost my hand and now I need to go to the hospital. Like that's one problem. Obviously go to the hospital, right? But if my problem is I keep thinking about that thing that happened 5 years ago, look around you. Is it happening right now? Chances are probably not. It's
right.
It's this abstract idea, this thought, going back to James Tripp's Hypnosis Without Trance model, right? It's the belief that the thing's happening right now that keeps it stuck in your head. So if I ask questions about what I would call the unconscious stuff that's part of the metaphor, all right? And the way that Mike Mandel teaches metaphor is that it's a short story that you deliver to somebody, but it has the therapeutic the outcome of it is supposed to be therapeutic, to where the story almost has like a one-to-one correlation between the problem and the story you're telling, right? And the way that he described it is fascinating. He said that the content of the story, like, oh, the house was blue, it was a green dog that was barking, like that kind of stuff, that's meant to distract the conscious mind. But it's the unconscious information, like who is the person that's meant to represent you and your problem? What is the vehicle that the person delivered the like magic sword or the, hidden spell or whatever? Like, how did they get that to the hero? It's those elements that are what we would consider the unconscious information. So those elements in hypnosis are things that we typically don't think about, like the metaphor itself. Dr. David Grove said that we speak about 6 to 7 metaphors a minute. So in like our everyday, hey, we're talking. I might say something like I said earlier, like, it's like we shoot the crap, right? Like, or if somebody passed away, oh, they kicked the bucket. Like those are like the idioms and that kind of stuff that we use every day.
Yeah.
When people are talking about their problems, emotions are typically represented as metaphor. Emotions, like it can be difficult for us to actually talk about them. Like Brene Brown, she wrote Atlas of the Heart.
Yes.
And she talks about how we can really only describe 3 emotions of like our general idea of the, I don't know, the 35,000 combinations of emotions that we can have, like in experience. We can only describe 3 of them: happy, sad, and upset, or pissed off, or mad, or whatever. I ruined the family friend. Sorry. She says it. Direct quote from her. So the other one, though, is the interesting one, and that's anxiety. Anxiety is often the like scapegoat that all the other emotions that we typically can't like understand or talk about or describe are thrown into. Like, oh, I feel this weird sensation and I don't like it. It must be anxiety. But when you actually dive into the metaphor of their emotion, you realize that it's not anxiety at all. It might be, oh, I feel like I have this weight on my chest. That's different. And then we can take that sensation and we can actually unpack it and figure out that that unconscious piece of information is now something that they can add a label to, and it gives it meaning. And once you do that, it starts to implode because they now have attached meaning to why they have the sensation. Whereas before it was abstract and they didn't know. But suddenly they speak it and they go, oh, I don't know, I guess I just have dread about going to work tomorrow. And you're like, and then they have that moment of epiphany, like, oh crap, I need to quit my job. And suddenly that's the epiphany. That's the spark of just genius. That's like, this is what I need to do next.
Yeah.
It never came from the hypnotist. It comes from the person.
This is so, I mean, look, Timothy, I think like in a from a pure curiosity perspective, and I know we were talking about the book Hypnotic Realities before we started. To me, what's amazing about this entire thing is how in the world, with an education as comprehensive as the Mike Mandel Training Academy, do you come along and all of a sudden create something that is like a not just like not you're not just it's not a bad spinoff. Most of it, you're not the Joey and Mike Mandel's friends. Like this is actually like another good thing. This is actually something that people want to tune into, so much so that Mike and Chris love it. I mean, what is it? I don't know if you set out having the intention of becoming their head of coaching and coming up with a whole different conversational modality, but I am kind of curious about where the formation of that came from. How did you just realize you were starting to do stuff that was different and people were paying attention? Were you going, wait a sec, did it kind of arise unconsciously? I have an epiphany about the way these sessions could go. I mean, I'm kind of curious for people out there that like taking source material and I guess, speak to the creator in all of us that can take great stuff and make something completely new out of it.
Yeah. So, honestly, like one of the things that I love about Mike Mandel and Chris Thompson, the co-founders of the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy, is they always credit the source, always, right? Like so like they credit me on some stuff, right? Which is amazing. For me, the thing that I think really took it all off was empowering questions from Mike Mandel and Chris Thompson. That because that's what I used myself to help myself out of some really bad mental and emotional like stuff that I was going through, right? The second thing though is there's this Australian hypnotist by the name of Scott Jansen. And Scott Jansen, he has this course called Advanced Conversational Hypnosis. And I'm also under the same mindset as Mike and Chris, that like we never bad talk, other trainers or anything like that. So nothing but great stuff to say about Scott. The one thing that I got from his training, though, that I didn't really see a lot of other people doing besides Milton and Rossi, was asking questions. And that seemed to be the entire antithesis of his conversational hypnosis approach, was just asking questions. Now, the way that Scott and I teach it is really different. And there's some other people out there that are also doing the same thing that I think it's mind blowing, like Stephen Ring. If anyone has an opportunity to look at his stuff, it's mind bending. It's mind bending something or whatever. I think it's mind bending questions is what he teaches. It's really, really good stuff. Then you have people like Vinnie Briggins, who only uses this like question modality to help people stop smoking. Well, Scott's training was it was good in that it gave me a couple of little nuggets that helped me realize that there was more to this than what I was watching, right? So one of the things that Scott talks about is how all roads lead to Rome. And so he paired that up with this other thing that he would say, which is you have to spot the unconscious moments. So the way that he would typically do this is he would just start asking people questions about their problem, and he would introduce why questions and all this other stuff, right? And then he would wait until the unconscious mind would give what we would call an external trance indicator. Like maybe their head would nod, their blink reflex might change. They might have what we call hypnotic mask, right? These external trance indicators, he would wait for them, and then he would go, okay, so now the unconscious mind is speaking. But the way that he would teach it was that it was so subtle. It was like this, almost like hidden, like you gotta like find it. It's like, and it's so hard to find, but you gotta do it, right? He taught me a lot about like calibrating, which is amazing. Calibration is like one of the massive skills that you learn to enter the loop. The other thing that he taught me though, is that I disagreed with him. Like, again, amazing trainer. But the way that he was describing the things happening in front of him were as though that they couldn't be replicated. It had to be like a spur of the moment, like you have to spot it when it happens. And if not, you missed out and it sucks. And I realized that was incorrect, because in my own experience, what I've found is that when you ask a really good question and give people the space to answer, I don't have to like try to like catch these unconscious moments happening. They just happen. But you have to make sure you give people enough time for them to happen, because hypnosis, as you were alluding to at the beginning, is like, what's the definition of it? Is it a state? Is it a process? Is it like both, right? Like we don't know. There's no legal definition of what hypnosis is, right? The interesting thing though is that all hypnosis is still self-hypnosis. And so if I ask a great question that sends your unconscious mind off on a journey, we know that we can cause hypnosis by a fixation of attention, right? And that's like one of the big things. You have to fixate their attention. And so questions cause an internal reflection. So if you can ask someone a really good question that's not about physical stuff, like I don't know if this is like audio only or video, but like I'm holding a can of something in my hand.
Yes.
If I asked you what color's the can, you can say yellow, right? But if I asked you something abstract, like I wonder how quickly you can forget what's on the inside of this can. Like you go, well, what? And now you're thinking to yourself, what does he mean? I've now caused you to go inside. And if I do that 5, 6-ish times, I've fractionated you. Because in hypnosis, fractionation is where someone is internal and they come back external and they go back in internally, right? Like Bernheim is the one that discovered this, and Dave Ellman is the one that actually weaponized it. So Dave Ellman was the one that was like, well, instead of waiting a month or two to see if the person goes deeper into trance, why not just like a week, a day, right now, like just immediately, let's try it, right? Questions have the same effect, because I found that every time when I was doing my journaling, when I'd answer the prompt and then I'd go back in and I'd answer it even deeper, I found more and more of that stuff started to come out, the unconscious stuff, right? So I knew that there was already something there to it. But really it was Scott, and then also like, and I haven't talked much about it, but it was Scott's like training on just like asking questions, right? That really sparked this idea of questions are it. It was also the stuff that I got from Mike and Chris, because most people aren't aware, like I'm the head of coaching at Mike Mandel Hypnosis, but I wasn't always. I actually was a blog post writer for them way back before AI and the proliferation of that everywhere. All the blog posts that if you look back, I think from like 2002 on, or no, 2000, no, I started working for them before COVID. So it was like 2019.
Yeah,
Something like that. Yeah. If you start reading some of those blog posts, some of that's my writing. And so Chris actually, I had, my own practice. It was in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Jason Laurent was like an hour away from me in Alexandria, right? And so I had my own practice and I was seeing clients and I didn't need the Mike Mandel Hypnosis Academy anymore. So I reached out to them just saying, hey, I just want to cancel my account. Little did I know, though, that Chris had been watching me from the sidelines because I was usually always inside the Facebook groups and I was posting up great content, doing group sessions where I would like hypnotize the whole group that was there with me. I was putting those videos out for people to participate and watch. And so when I told Chris, hey, I want to cancel, he goes, I can't let you. He goes, you're so good, like at just being like a person in the community that people talk about and like they enjoy having you there. I don't want to lose you from the community. Is there a way that we could do like a service for service thing? And I was seeing clients. So I was like, well, I don't know, maybe like what do you need help with? And he goes, well, I need someone to help me write blog posts because it's me. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I could totally help you with that. You're not supposed to be worrying about that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I just started writing blog posts and he gave me lifetime access, right? So as I'm writing these blog posts, I'm talking to Chris about the stuff that I'm doing with my clients, asking questions, how they're getting these really good results. And also I talked to them a little bit about what I learned from Scott and all these other great trainers. And I said, I think I want to put something together because I loved what I learned from Scott, but I didn't like the approach that he gave as this like mysterious, you got to catch it or else you missed out kind of thing. And I said, we can do this stuff intentionally with traditional hypnosis. What's stopping that from it happening during everyday conversation? And Chris said, there's nothing, which is why a lot of people will like lean on like language patterns and all this other stuff. And that's just fluff. If you didn't learn any of that and only learned how to ask better questions, you'd be still much farther along than the person that only learned language patterns.
So true. Yeah.
Because again, it puts the onus back on the hypnotist being the one to do the change work. And it doesn't work that way, right? So I worked on this, like in the genesis of Enter the Loop was probably like a 3-year project. And I would bring stuff to Mike and Chris and I would get their, I would get their buy-in and they would help me out and like, oh yeah, you should do this. And instead of that, and I would show them my mind map and all my sources and all my research and stuff. And then one day it just clicked. I had this entire mind map, like a mind node and like all the chapters, all the sections, like everything I was going to teach. And I presented it to Chris and he was like, you've got something here, dude. He was like, nobody is teaching this the way that you are. Because I happen to have a knack throughout the community for being the guy that can take really like academic expert level, like, philosophical ideas and make them digestible, almost like the explain like I'm 5.
Yes.
Like, yeah, I'm one of those kind of people because I hate it when something's like so complex. I got to write it down to figure it out. Like I just like easy stuff, right? I call myself the lazy hypnotist, which is funny, but
I love it.
Yeah. So I had this framework and Chris was like, yeah, you got something here, right? So I distilled down all the stuff that I had into easy to understand frameworks, like models, because that is really what makes things great is if you have a model that you can not only use, that other people can use and you could replicate. Meaning that if I gave you all the frameworks that I had and never told you, you can apply these to conversation, you'd be able to look at these frameworks and go, oh yeah, these work as like traditional hypnosis or coaching or therapy. The model still works regardless of whatever label you want to put on it. So that's how I knew I had something great here because I was able to take really complicated philosophical, theoretical hypnosis techniques, modalities, frameworks, and make it digestible and easy to understand.
Yeah. And this is, this is out there. We're going to post the link for people to check out the course, which is so, gosh, you packed a lot into this thing. Yes, it is. There'll be a special link to go to entertheloop.com that we'll post in the show notes, and very generously, Timothy. You've given the gift of a coupon code. If you use Open Loops in checkout, you'll get some some good value back. I'll put it that way. So yeah, no, I'm definitely excited for the listeners to check that out, as well as you're doing. I mean, you're doing live trainings too. I know, people may listen to this after the fact, but if you get in, you have a live cohort coming up the 17th of November, right?
Yeah. It's a 6-week cohort. We do a deep dive into all the foundational stuff with Enter the Loop. It's every Monday, 1 p.m. Eastern, and that's from November 17th through December 22nd. So it'll be every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern.
That's awesome. And I'm guessing this isn't the last time.
No. Of course not. No, or it's about twice a year.
Yes, but I know you make yourself very accessible. If people purchase the course too, you make yourself very accessible. You are still out there. The thing that Chris Thompson liked about you, you're not above it now. You're still out there in the groups, talking to people, helping them out. Look, if there, I'm very excited by this. You've definitely you've made some stuff spin for me, which is all I can ask for in a guest.
That's right.
If there's anything that our guests, our listeners could leave with today about, I don't know. I mean, you're the question guy. If there was one question or one thought or one metaphor that could get people on the path to exploring their loops in a way that they haven't yet, what would you leave them with?
Yeah. So for everybody listening, what is it exactly that you believe about the loops that you may or may not have already closed? And how does that belief help you begin to imagine what it would be like if those loops closed? Because how you imagine it is more so about what you physically feel, the sensation somewhere in the body, and how you notice that sensation. Because the truth is that what you experience, about how you believe that experience begins to take you on a journey, is less about the problem and more about your awareness you're becoming to have now about everything possible. Because look, Enter the Loop is not just a course, it is a mission. I'm on a mission to help 1 million+ people have a breakthrough, an epiphany, that spark of genius that just helps them finally have the life they truly want. And I can't do it on my own, which is why I started Enter the Loop. It's a community of people just like you, change workers, people interested in helping other people and also helping themselves. We have community-led practices every week. The community volunteers their time to run these practices. And then also I'm in there, you get Q&As, you get the private community. That's almost everybody has a private community, but it's more about not like what you get from the course, but more so what you do with it. What do you do with the material? So if I had one question for whoever's listening is, what would you do if you had the ability to change somebody's life forever? And what's stopping you from doing that today?
Timothy September, thank you so much for bringing me, for letting me enter and hopefully not even ever exit the loop.
That's right.
I appreciate you coming on. Very fascinating conversation. Everybody check out the links in the show notes. Sign up for the cohorts. Keep following Timothy for very interesting stuff. Love the conversation. And please, come back again. I'm excited to see where you take the hypnotic arts next.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Timothy September. The loops have been entered. Thank you again for coming on the show. And when you go to that link in my show notes for his course, and make sure in the coupon section, type in the code OpenLoops. Timothy gave us a very generous discount. See, there's no war between the loopers. There's never been a war. We're one world loop, okay? I don't need any of this beef anymore. between the different loopers. I'm pretty sure the government shutdown was about the bipartisan loop agenda. I think we're over that now. Rodney McGilvery, thank you for the theme music. Zero Boy, thank you for the pre-theme music. Follow the show, rate the show, give it 5 stars, leave a review. I love you, Looper. Talk soon.